One of the biggest mistakes leaders make is assuming that agreement means alignment. Hey, Internet friends, it's Joe, and welcome to another episode of Simplify, Focus, Scale. And today I want to talk about the perception gap between what leaders think and what staff experience when it comes to agreement versus alignment, because they really are two different things, even though they're often looked at as the same. What happens is that leaders go into, let's say, a meeting, for example, or they send out a communication thinking they've been very, very clear. And they leave that meeting thinking that everybody's agreed, so that means everybody understands and that everybody supports the decision because nobody spoke up and said anything to the contrary. But agreement is what's happening in the meeting. Alignment is what happens afterward. Now, why is that so important? Well, agreement is just people going along with it because they feel like they need to, or that they should, or that it's the right thing to do. It's about safety for your position as an employee. Alignment is truly being on board with a decision and supporting it fully and having the employees act in a way that multiplies your energies and your efforts. And we see this a lot when people do things like come up with a new direction for the firm or institute a new process or something like that, when the leader just decides that they're going to make this sweeping change without really considering how it impacts the staff all the way down the hierarchy. One of my favorite examples of this was I worked with a financial firm that the leader was very forward thinking, very high energy, and really liked to chase the next thing, and not in a negative way. I want to be clear. He really believed in being forward thinking and giving everything he could to his clients and trying to give them the best. But with that, often involved lots of changes that impacted his staff. And what would happen is he would have these meetings and say, okay, we're going to start this new process, for example. And one of my favorites was when he decided to completely revamp the lead generation process and how leads were then distributed to the financial professionals on his team. And everybody just agreed to it because they trusted him and because nobody wanted to speak up and potentially get punished for speaking up. Because while they did trust him, it was not an environment where most of his staff felt safe speaking up. And what happened was they tried to implement this plan that hadn't been very well thought through. The leader knew what assumptions he would make on those phone calls, in responding to those emails, and so on. But his staff was left floundering with no direction and no decision-making process that had been outlined. So the adoption was poor, staff was confused, frustration existed both at the staff level and the leadership level, because at this point, the CEO is saying, why can't anybody execute? Why is my staff not understand what I'm trying to do? And then also why didn't anybody tell me? So then the leader, 2 weeks later is sitting there saying, why didn't anybody tell me this was going to be a problem? Well, the reality was nobody felt comfortable saying it. And if nobody feels comfortable saying it, you'll never hear it as a leader until it's too late. So alignment isn't created when people say yes. It's created when people understand the why, understand the impact, and they feel heard in the process. So keep in mind, it's not about whether or not people agree with the decision. The question is whether or not they understood it, supported it, and felt safe enough to challenge it. Because agreement can be given in seconds. Alignment takes work. Thanks so much for joining me today, everybody. I hope this has been helpful. Be sure to like the video and make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you're not already. And if you have any questions, thoughts, comments, feel free to drop them below. I do respond to all the comments. And of course, if you'd like to discuss this or any other topics with me directly, feel free to reach out to me. You can go to JP Coaching Now to find all of my socials. And until next week, thanks for joining me for today's episode of Simplify, Focus, Scale.